Buckle up, Buttercup, because this is the list of best alternatives to woke software as of October of 2024. This is what I've come up with. These are my opinions of the best alternatives to some of the most woke software out there as of right now. This may change in the future. This most likely will change in the future. But as of this snapshot of this point in time, these are the best alternatives to woke software. And I want to define woke software because let's be very clear about what this is. So, woke software, noun, any computer software of which the owners or developers of said software hate you and discriminate against you for being a normal human. That's the general description here, right? Very simple. Very, very, very simple. And I think it applies to a huge number of software projects and software companies out there. And let's also, while we're at it, let's define non-woke software, right? Let's be crystal clear about the difference between woke and non-woke software. Non-woke software. Noun. Any computer software of which the owners or developers of said software do not care what your politics, religion, sex, or ethnicity are. You could probably add in a whole mountain list of other attributes right in there. But essentially, non-woke software is software written by people who just want to make some good software and would like you to use it, please. That's it. Real simple, right? And I also want to make something else crystal clear. Having different political views is fine. We're not going to be talking about examples where the CEO of a company contributed to a leftist political candidate. No. People can have whatever political views they want. I don't care. I don't care if the person making my software is hard right, hard left, centrist, up, down, front, back. I could care less, right? If they're making great software, I'm going to use that software. That's all there is to it. Now, if they hate me because of who I am, because of the color of my skin, or my gender, or who I voted for, well, then now we've got another problem. If they hate me to the point where they discriminate against me, and they yell about how awful I am, and they specifically say that they don't want people like me using their software, well, now I'm dealing with a piece of woke software. Woke political activist software, and I don't want to use that software if I can avoid it because, let's be honest, it's going to make me feel crummy. When you turn on your computer, you want to feel good, right? Computers should make you happy. You should enjoy as much as possible using whatever software you have to use, and it feels yucky to think, wow, this operating system, Office Suite, and web browser are made by people who despise me. They want me dead, and they've said I'm not even allowed to contribute to their project or work at their companies. Ray, yay! No. No. We don't want to put up with that. So I'm going to go through these in categories, one at a time. I'm going to list out some examples of woke software and some examples of non-woke software. These will not be complete. I want to be very clear. As I go through them, and I'm just going to bring up the operating system list here so you can get an example here, you will undoubtedly think of many examples that we could add to the non-woke and the woke sides individually. These are just some of the ones that came to my head, some obvious and interesting examples of both. And on the non-woke side, the non-woke options, I listed the ones that I think would be most valuable and interesting for other people to be looking at because they're worthwhile in one way or another. Let's start with operating systems. There's a lot of woke operating systems out there, especially in the open source world, but not exclusively. For example, Red Hat and IBM. Crazy woke. They discriminate against white people and guys. They have training programs with actual slide decks where they try to explain to people how evil it is to be a white person. Okay, crazy woke. Crazy discriminatory, just awful. They're getting sued into oblivion right now for that. So everything out of IBM and Red Hat operating system wise, woke, goes into the woke garbage can. That includes Red Hat Enterprise Linux and Fedora Linux. Fedora Linux is run essentially 99% by Red Hat. While there are community aspects to it, people are by and large paid to work on Fedora. So Fedora Linux, into the dustbin. SUSE and OpenSUSE. Now, that's another big corporate Linux, extraordinarily woke. They call conservatives rotten flesh that needs to be cut out. They mass ban conservatives. This is not exactly a non-woke OS. This is super woke. So again, SUSE Linux, OpenSUSE into the dustbin there. Elementary OS. I add this one here because there was a point in time where it was a distinct rising star in the Linux world. It was a top 5 Linux distribution for a while in terms of popularity and market share, at least that seemed that way. Over the last few years, though, it has been cratering as they have declared they don't want people who are conservative, point blank. Like if you vote for the wrong person, they don't want you to even install or download their software. So, okay. Woke it is, elementary. I also am going to include FreeBSD in the woke list. Now, the reality is FreeBSD exists in a bit of a gray area at the moment. There was a point in time some years back where FreeBSD was extremely woke. The people that were running it were running it into the ground, essentially, with extraordinarily discriminatory woke policies and just some peculiarness. They even outlawed hug emojis at one point, just because they felt that it was violent or something. It was just bizarre stuff. Over the last couple years, that has begun to shift, where FreeBSD has become less woke. So the reality is, at the current trajectory, I would feel comfortable putting FreeBSD in the non-woke category within the next year or two. But right now, it's just this side of woke, so I felt like it was worth including here. I'm also including Microsoft Windows. You'll see Microsoft come up on this list a couple of times because Microsoft as a company is extraordinarily woke. It doesn't get as much coverage for their wokeness as some other companies do, but Microsoft as a company does crazy woke things. They have very woke hiring and discriminatory hiring practices. They spend a huge amount of money and resources encouraging their employees to get sex change operations for their children. Weird. It's a real thing. It's weird. It's creepy. I don't understand how creepy and crazy Microsoft has become, if I'm being honest with you, but I have to put Microsoft Windows into this category. Likewise, they've been shoehorning more AI features into Windows, which doesn't necessarily make them woke, but the AI features they've been adding in have been very woke. Like if you use their image generation tools, you can get some very weird woke results and very discriminatory results. So again, woke operating systems. So what are the non-woke options here? Well, if you want an operating system that is distinctly non-woke, does not discriminate against you, on the Linux side, you've actually got quite a few number of options, including Debian, Arch, and even Ubuntu. This may surprise a lot of people because many of the people who work on Ubuntu are very political. They are very politically leftist. However, the distribution and the company behind it, Canonical, have stayed extraordinarily, surprisingly non-political. You'll notice at times when SUSE and Red Hat and many other Linux companies will take very extreme political stances. For the most part, Canonical and Ubuntu have stayed clear of it. I'm a big fan of that. I like that. So again, me and the bulk of the Ubuntu contributors may not agree politically, but they have not been a woke operating system. So I feel comfortable putting Ubuntu Linux, the most high profile of the consumer Linux distributions, on this non-woke OS list. I also want to include OpenBSD because OpenBSD is similar to Ubuntu in that regard. Except it's more libertarian-y, and they have yet to take extreme political stances that I would consider to be woke. So I feel comfortable recommending OpenBSD as a non-woke operating system option. Now, here's one that is going to be controversial for a lot of people, but I think it belongs here. Mac OS. Apple's Mac OS, I would define as a non-woke operating system. I mean, it's Apple, by and large, if you look at the numbers, people at Apple are left-leaning politically. They are. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They just are. When you look at who they donate to and whatnot, it skews hard left. It absolutely does. Not as hard left as many companies, but pretty hard left. But what I've noticed within Apple is that they have tried most of the time to stay very non-political, right? They stay out of the politics most of the time. There's a few examples, but for the most part, Apple tries to stay clear of that. And I think that is in part because when you start to look at the corporate structure of Apple, you start to realize that while there are many extreme left-leaning people within management and executives throughout Apple, there's also some quite right-leaning people and a lot of centrists as well. And so it kind of keeps Apple a little bit more grounded there. It's not perfect. And it's not, I wouldn't exactly say they're pegging the needle of their non-wokeness. They're moving more towards the center, and they could someday easily cross over to the woke side. But they're on the right side for right now. And so I would include Mac OS on there as well. Now, before we go further on the operating system front, I'm not going to include mobile operating systems or servers in this list. I may do so in a future list. This is just for desktop operating systems. On the mobile side right now, personally, again, I would view iOS as the less woke of the mobile operating systems, simply because Google as a company with Android is a much more woke company. That's just how they are. And let's actually get into that right now. Let's talk about web browsers, because this is, I think, probably one of the more important ones that are out there, because as you've seen, there's a lot of operating system option, right? You can run Mac OS or Windows or Linux or various BSDs. There's lots and lots of options, and there's plenty more to boot. But we all need a web browser right now, right? The way people use computing, you can't really get by without a web browser. So, unfortunately, the default web browsers are very, very woke. Mozilla Firefox, extraordinarily woke. We've covered this in depth at the Lunduke Journal. They spend a tremendous amount of their money and their resources on extremist political causes. They just had this big AI event because they're moving their whole company to AI and advertising. They had this big AI event recently where it was a big ball where everyone got all dressed up, fancy and whatnot, and it was not so much about AI as about how they can use AI to push political causes or shoehorn politics into AI, and it was all extremely woke stuff. And in fact, Mozilla has a stated policy as a goal of discriminating against and silencing anyone who is centrist or right of center. In fact, they famously use the phrase that they want to do more than deplatforming of anyone who votes the wrong way, meaning Republican, right-leaning, whatever. So Mozilla Firefox, woke browser. Google Chrome. Now, Google, well, again, let's put aside your feelings about what's a good browser, what's a good engine, other business practices they may engage in that you may like or dislike. Let's just focus on the wokeness of it here. Google Chrome is an extraordinarily woke browser made by a very woke company. They've got woke business practices. They've got woke technology in their AI stack. It's woke across the board. I mean, shoot, Google image generation on their AI, famously, you ask it to generate an image of Napoleon and it'll generate an image of a black woman with dreadlocks. Like, it's like, okay, what is happening here? All in the name of inclusivity, Google seeks to rewrite history in a woke way and discriminate against both their employees and their users in the process. So Google Chrome, woke. Microsoft Edge, woke. Because it's Microsoft. Microsoft is just an extraordinarily woke company. They deeply hate people like me and people like most of you. And so they just, boom, they go into the woke category. Now, non-woke browsers, this gets hard. There are many web browsers out there, forks of Firefox using the Firefox engine, forks of Chrome and using the Chromium engine, and all over the place. there are, and really there's one that I left off this list kind of on purpose, and that's Apple Safari. Apple Safari I would put in the non-woke category, but I just don't like Safari that much. So I left it off the list. But I would like to point out Brave. Brave is run by Brendan Eich, the man who created JavaScript, the person who was at one point the CEO and previously before that the CTO of Mozilla over Firefox before he kind of got ousted because he was a bit more conservative. And so Brave, there's not a drop of wokeness to Brave, right? Brave is one of those web browsers you can use and you can feel good about using it. Now, there's one caveat here. The rendering engine itself is a fork off of the Chromium engine, which means it does have some tie-ins back to Google, but that said, that's just the way open source works. So I feel comfortable using it just the same. The other option here is Ladybird. However, if you're watching the video version of this, you'll note that I put 1 day in parentheses here because Ladybird has come a tremendously long way. It's a new project and they have stayed extraordinarily non-political. I love it. I can't even figure out what the politics of the developer is. The developers are. I don't know. I have no idea. I've asked several questions of the devs behind Ladybird and I can't get a read on it, which I love. I want to be clear, that's fantastic. It doesn't matter to me if they're leftist, right, centrist, I don't care. They do not seem to be discriminating in any way, and they're taking a pretty hard stance on that. And the browser is written, from scratch web browser rendering engine. So at one point over the next, I'd say 1 to 2 years, Ladybird, I think, will become a very viable non-woke web browser option. So, which is great because then I feel like we will have really 3 web browsers that I could put in the non-woke category: Brave, Ladybird, and Safari. I don't love Safari all that much, so I included it on the list. Let's talk about a really easy one real quick. Email clients. Now, I know a lot of you use webmail nowadays, so you don't really use a standalone email client most of the time. But on the desktop, Microsoft Outlook, again, it's Microsoft, so it's woke, on and on. Mozilla Thunderbird is a great one because it's cross-platform, but it's so woke, it's ridiculous, and it's under Mozilla, so that has to go into the woke category as well. The one that I feel comfortable, the only one that I feel comfortable recommending at this point is called Betterbird. You can just look it up, type in Betterbird into your search engine, and you'll find it. It is a fork of Mozilla Thunderbird. And it fixes a lot of the technical issues, which we won't get into here. But beyond that, it's also distinctly not woke. It's a non-political project. It just is a fork that does away with the politics and focuses on the tech, which is something that Thunderbird just hasn't done. And so I recommend Betterbird as the non-woke option. All right, moving on from that. Now let's talk about Office Suites. This is one that I have feelings about, strong ones. I used to work on Microsoft Office. I worked on the Microsoft Office team for some years, a quarter of a century ago. It was a long time ago. But reluctantly, I have to put Microsoft Office into the woke Office Suite list for all the reasons we've already talked about. If it's Microsoft, it goes on the woke list. Same with Google. If it's Google, it goes on the woke list. It just has to be, which for many people leaves LibreOffice, the open source Office Suite, as the alternative, right? That is the open source king of Office Suites nowadays. However, they are a little woke. Now, I'm going to say flat out, the group behind LibreOffice, the Document Foundation, is not crazy woke, right? So if you're looking for shades of gray here and you can just plug your nose a little bit, LibreOffice ain't so bad. But it does fall into the woke side of things. And if you want an example of this, go check out the code of conduct for the Document Foundation and for LibreOffice. You'll see that it's directly referencing and pulling in content from some of the most extremist, discriminatory angry, hard woke groups in the world of open source and computer software. And their code of conduct is both lengthy and includes many parts in it that I would deem as highly woke. That said, there haven't been a huge number of instances where people have run afoul of their code of conduct people at the Document Foundation. So in effect, in practice, they're fairly relaxed. However, there are enough people that are pretty hard woke within their organization that it makes me a little uncomfortable, and it has to go into the woke side. Now, for non-woke office suites, there are a few options out there, but in my opinion, the only one that is at all viable was the Apple iWork suite, but that requires that you're using an Apple device, right? It's available for iPads and for Mac OS and all that sort of thing, but that doesn't help Linux users all that much. In fact, it's of the point where if you really want to use a non-woke office suite and you don't have an Apple device, my personal recommendation, and this may seem crazy, like even if you're running Linux, is use an older version of Microsoft Office. Because there was a point where there were a large number of very libertarian and right-leaning and conservative individuals within management at Microsoft. And Microsoft, while they went back and forth politically here and there, and the politics of Bill Gates notwithstanding, Microsoft as a company didn't necessarily discriminate in woke ways, right? They discriminated, but not in woke ways in the past. So if you want to go back and use a 20-year-old version of Microsoft Office running under Wine in Linux, that's a decent non-woke alternative. I know that may seem crazy to many people, but it really is a viable approach here. I mean, once you get outside of that, you start getting into some of the lesser office suites that just don't have quite as many features. All right, let's talk about graphic design, and let's make this really simple. I know there's a ton of graphic design software out there, a lot of specialty ones for a huge number of options. But what we really want to focus on here is the core of graphic design, because Adobe, it gone woke, right? Adobe's gone pretty woke, which means Photoshop and the whole of Adobe Creative Suite is just out. Now, for me, that's not a problem because I have problems with Adobe business-wise beyond that, and I just don't want to use their software at this point. Even the good, there is good quality software in there. I'm annoyed by using it. But since Adobe's gone pretty hard woke in a large number of ways, including some of their weird AI generation stuff that's been very woke and the like over the last year or so, I would recommend GIMP. Now, I know many of you are going to be like, oh, come on, GIMP's not ready. GIMP lacks this feature, blah, blah, blah. That's not what we're talking about today. For many people, GIMP will do the job, especially the upcoming version of GIMP that's just about to be released in the coming days. It looks a little bit nicer for a lot of people. But GIMP is more non-woke. Now, this is a little bit funny because GIMP is tied in many ways to the GNOME project, and the GNOME project is extraordinarily woke, right? Extraordinarily so, such that, and I think this deserves a little asterisk here. So let's come back to the operating system side. Now, I had at the very top of the list here Ubuntu. Now, Ubuntu in the non-woke operating system list is non-woke, but it uses GNOME for the default desktop environment. My recommendation, if you want to use Ubuntu but don't want GNOME, is pick one of the Ubuntu derivatives. There's many versions of Ubuntu, including a KDE version of Ubuntu, a Mate version of Ubuntu, which is old GNOME prior to their totally losing their mind, XFCE Ubuntu, and many others. Or you can just simply install the straightforward Ubuntu and change your desktop environment to something else if you're really looking to stay away from as many of the woke pieces and parts as possible. All right, now let's move away from software that you install and let's talk about online services for a bit. Search engines, as a general rule, are a problem. Google is a woke search engine. They censor results for political causes. They rank results for political causes. And it's always for the benefit of the more hard leftist extremist, and woke causes. In fact, they downright hide results of political things that they disagree with, whether it be vaccinations or countries they don't like or political candidates they don't like, and on and on and on. Bing has had some issues with that as well, in addition to some of their extraordinarily woke AI stuff that's been integrated into Bing, and the fact that Microsoft is just an extraordinarily discriminatory and just creepy woke company. So Google and Bing, those are out. Got to toss them off to the side. Now, I'm going to include two others here that may ruffle a few feathers. DuckDuckGo. DuckDuckGo has famously pushed itself as a privacy-centric alternative to Google. However, they also discriminate based on politics. Those politics usually veer towards the politics of the Democrat Party in the United States, and they use Google as their backend, right? So even if DuckDuckGo wasn't censoring, they're using results from Google, which is censoring and ranking things based on political preferences of the people running Google, which means the DuckDuckGo search results by design are going to be woke. The same is true of Start Page. Many people like Start Page because it's an independent, privacy-centric search engine. But when I say independent, that just means they're not owned by Google. They're not independent in the sense that they use Google and Bing for their search results. I believe Bing is for their mobile search and Google for their web and desktop search, but they rely on both Microsoft and Google for all the results, which means those results are by definition, by design, extraordinarily already biased towards woke political causes and the like. One of the best options, in my opinion, the only currently viable option with a future to it that is non-woke in the search engine space is Brave Search. If you're using the Brave browser, that makes it nice and easy. But why this is viable is really simple. It has its own web crawler. Right? So not only is Brave run by Brendan Eich, who is himself very much non-woke, but they do their own web crawling, which means they're not reliant on Google and Bing search results. They're not just a privacy front-end screen for some other company who is woke. No. They're running their whole thing. Now, if you've been a user of Brave Search, going from Google to Brave is a bit of a transition because especially in the early days, some of the search results were a little bit iffy because they were kind of getting themselves stood up. I've seen that improve dramatically over the last several months, and Brave Search has increasingly become my primary search engine. Now, that doesn't mean I haven't used Google or Bing or Start Page. However, Brave Search works more often than not, and increasingly more often to the point where I default start at Brave Search now. And it's a non-woke option. There aren't a lot of great non-woke options that are truly viable. There's some interesting non-woke independent browser engines and projects out there, but Brave Search is the only one where I'm like, that one is functional today and is even more promising in the future. Let's talk about video sites, because this is kind of an obvious one, but this one's kind of a win right now. It wasn't the case previously. So obviously YouTube is the default video site for most people. And I kind of just stopped listing video sites because there's a lot of video sites out there. But you can think of TikTok and many others if you want to. But really, it's YouTube is extraordinarily woke. I mean, shoot, they do strikes against and demonetize the Lunduke Journal's YouTube channel on the regular. So by the way, if you're watching this on YouTube, get to one of the other platforms. It's just go to locals or something, because oh my heavens, you never know when YouTube's just going to make it so I can't upload again. They've done it twice this year. Last year they did it 2 or 3 times. I guess it happens regularly and just out of the blue. But amazingly, over the last year to 2 years, more options have become viable in the video space. If you want to go watch video, and even if you want to be publishing video, Rumble has become distinctly viable. It really, really has. Locals is a bit of a different sort of a thing. It's not quite a free-for-all Wild West video site like YouTube or Rumbles is, but Locals is more of a curated, I'm going to go to just this one creator's page and view all their sites, right? View all their videos. But it's a nice non-woke option. Same with Substack. And this one surprises me a little bit, because video is not a primary feature for Substack, and people don't necessarily think of Substack as a non-woke site, I think, by default. But the leadership behind Substack, while they themselves are leftist politically, they've made really hard pro-free speech stances such that they've really angered people on the left, because they refuse to censor some of the more hard right publications that publish to Substack. And then when they added in video, so you can watch videos without commercials on Substack, that really made it a much more viable platform. And it's proven over time to work quite well. Again, it's more like Locals in that you're not going to go there and just start searching for videos across, thousands and thousands of publishers. But if you already know one of the creators or publishers that you like is on there, it's really easy to follow them to get all of their videos. And then there's X. And this one's a bit weird, but since Elon took over Twitter and rebranded it X and really beefed up the video functionality, I've noticed some distinct success with people publishing both short and extreme long form video to X. A lot of times they get political and whatnot, but there's been a pretty wide range of content, of video content posted and published to X. And even the Lunduke Journal has been publishing not all, but a good chunk of our video episodes over to X, sort of as a test to see how it would perform. And some of them do surprisingly well. It's becoming a very viable platform for that. So what's great about all this is that regardless of what method you want to publish your videos under or how you want to get and watch your videos, we're getting more and more video sites that are distinctly non-woke with a hard pro-free speech and even highly friendly towards right-leaning creators ethos. And I think that's really encouraging. When you've got, like, in the search engine space, you've got Brave as the lone beacon on the hill. In the video site space, it's a whole different ball of wax. We've got a lot of options, and that's pretty cool. Social media. Let's talk about one more here in social media sites. Again, things have shifted a lot over the last couple years. I think if you rewind 2 years, 3 years, social media was, if you were not woke, right? If you were anything other than hard leftist, the odds of you getting banned from any social media, from Twitter, from Facebook, anywhere, was actually fairly high. My whole account over on Twitter got deleted for posting something that I would feel was not even political. And but the hard leftists that were running Twitter at the time, pre-Elon, when they felt it was political, so they nuked my account. Nowadays, that's shifted where we actually do have a few really viable options. So on the woke side, obviously, we've got things like Facebook. I would still classify them as highly woke, and Instagram, Reddit, the entire Fediverse, which includes Mastodon and the like, and Threads, as well as LinkedIn, which is Microsoft. I would put all of those into the woke category, and many others. This bullet list could be quite long. But on the non-woke social media side of things, we actually have some viable options now. There was a period of time where one of the most viable options was something called Gab. The problem with Gab was it cultivated a set of users and was run by individuals who, while they were not leftist woke, they kind of almost went around the bend on the right-leaning stuff, such that they came around and were woke in their own way. You know what I mean? Like they were somewhat discriminatory against people based on race and religion and a lot of other things, and it was an uncomfortable place to be. And Gab never really got huge, right? It got big enough to be a viable business. It got big enough to be interesting. I created a Gab account because I wanted to tinker with it, and I checked in from time to time, but I never really felt great there. It wasn't fantastic. It was a weird subset of the hard right, but almost hard left group of individuals that almost didn't fit anywhere else. So God bless them, they found a space. But nowadays, we have, in my mind, 3 really great options for social media that I would define as non-woke, where the companies aren't actively discriminating against people like the woke companies do. And that'd be X, which is funny because Twitter was just awful some years ago, but now the new Twitter, X, is not. While they still do have some censorship issues from time to time, and there's so many people on it that, of course, some people are woke and some people are non-woke and some people are anti-woke. It's all over the map. The company itself is distinctly non-woke. The same is true of Locals, which is where I publish most of my content. It's a distinctly non-woke platform, and it becomes a nice social media space for that. As well as Truth Social. Now that's famously Donald Trump's company, his Truth Social. That has become an increasingly viable option. Now, personally, I don't really use Truth Social. I have an account there, but it's become a viable option over X or Instagram or many others, or Threads or the Fediverse. Truth Social's become a bit more viable. And I would put all 3 of those in the non-woke category and very viable options. The fact that X is there in the viable options and is viable not just as a social media platform, but as a video publishing and even article publishing platform is surprising and interesting. Things are really expanding nicely. So what we have here in October of 2024 is an environment where we have an increasing number of highly woke pieces of software and services that just seem to be imploding and exploding at a rapid rate. I mean, it seems like we can't go a week or two without news of another big software project or foundation or company just exploding because they went crazy woke and started discriminating against people in just obscene ways. But at the same time, we're also seeing significant progress on all the alternatives, so much so that it's not really looking out into the future and hoping that these alternatives will one day be viable. They're there now. Right, it's sort of like with the video sharing sites. The fact that we've got X and Locals and Rumble, and we've got all of these sites, and even Substack for publishing platforms for video is an impressive thing. We didn't have that a few years ago. A few years ago, it was sketchy at best. But now, when you look at the numbers. Like live streaming is a great example. Live video streaming consistently, some of the most high performing live video streams across any platform, including YouTube and Twitch, are happening on Rumble. Fascinating. It's fascinating. I take a look at that every now and then because those numbers are very important for my business, obviously. I don't do a lot of live streaming, but that means that the sheer quantity of active users on those platforms, it is shifting towards the non-woke alternatives. And that's darn encouraging. That's darn encouraging. So there you have it. There's my list as of October 2024. If I left off your favorite non-woke software or service, my apologies. If I left off the one that you hate on the woke side, my apologies on that too. If I put one in a category that you felt it didn't deserve to be in, sorry about that. This is just my interpretation of it based on that. Feel free to comment wherever you're watching or listening to this if you would like to add any additional, because it's worth adding to this, and there's certainly a huge number of categories that we just don't have time to get into today. So with that, I want to thank all of the subscribers to the Lunduke Journal for making it possible to do this sort of thing. You are absolutely amazing. You make it so I don't have to take a penny from big tech. So go to lunduke.com, lunduke.locals.com if you want to subscribe. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes across the inner tubes, I do declare, end broadcast.